My name is Nimi Wadei, and I'd like to welcome you to the second webinar in the series, Supporting Neurodiverse Children During Divorce. This is brought to you by the LoneStar Land Service Learning Project team, and we're 4 members in the team. We have Marianne Hughes. You can see her out there. Thank you, Marianne. And we have Crystal John, and we have Gail Hoover-Nation, and myself as the team. And working with us is our amazing coach and supervisor, Judy Blake. So thank you so much for joining us today. I would like you to see the next slides for our funding disclosure and also some housekeeping rules. So this webinar will be recorded. If you would like to protect your privacy, please turn off your camera and/or change your display name to your initials or a nickname. Questions for the presenter are encouraged. Please raise your hand if you have a question or type in your question to the chat box. Please stay muted unless you're called upon to speak. And please be respectful of others' experiences and feelings, as the event subject matter is very sensitive. And also we have a 5-question survey at the end of the webinar. We'll be very appreciative if you would complete that before you sign off today. So thank you so much. Our presentation today is strategies to help children with neurodevelopmental disabilities during divorce. And this is presented by our able Dr. Michelle Forrester. Dr. Forrester is a child psychologist with expertise in early childhood issues, including anxiety, depression, attachment disorders, attention problems, ADHD, behavioral difficulties, child trauma, and autistic spectrum disorders. Dr. Forrester is well known in the city and has been here for quite a long time working in Houston. Please welcome Dr. Forrester to take on this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, like she said, I've been in Houston for a long time. I'm located on the west side of town. In private practice now. I was at Texas Children's prior, and young children are my passion and have been my entire career. So I want to start off by talking about something that I talk with all parents about, no matter what the child's presentation is and no matter what the family situation may be. And I think it is absolutely relevant to the situation of divorce, and maybe even more so during those hard times initially when children are experiencing lots of transitions and feelings of out of control. And so we refer to it by a variety of names, but special playtime is one of the things that's how I kind of refer to it as special playtime. And this is important in building relationship with your child. So no matter the level of your child's abilities or disabilities, it doesn't matter what the child wants to do, because this time is truly child-led. And so what I ask all parents to do is create a time during the week where you can be unencumbered, where you can truly engage one-on-one and give your child your full undivided attention. And what that looks like is no other siblings present, the dog or the cat's not present, you don't carry your phone in with you, you're not thinking about dinner or the groceries that you forgot to pick up or the class project that's tomorrow and you didn't get the markers for, or whatever. This is truly a time where you can set aside everything and truly engage one-on-one with your child, because that is truly what every human on the planet wants, is that unencumbered engagement of, people ask how do I build my child's self-esteem? Children know that where you spend your time and your money is where your priorities are, right? So if you carve out time and you make time for a child to do what they want to do, children of all ages really lament lack of control. And divorce is a time where lack of control is really amplified for children. So this is a space where the child gets to be in charge. The child is the director and the parent is the assistant. You are there not to teach, not to get anything from them, not to try to find out what they're thinking. You're not trying to morally educate them. I mean, literally to the point that if they pick up a truck and call it a car, right now, it's just a car. You're not going to correct them. You're not going to teach them anything in this time frame. This is truly about engagement. It's about being present. And that is, you've probably all read the books about filling your buckets and things that fill buckets and things that take away from buckets. This is about emotional fuel. And where children get their emotional fuel is from their parents. And so this is how you're going to fill them up and fuel them literally to go out into the world and go to school and wait in line and take turns and do all the things that they need to do. So special playtime, it sounds very easy. It sounds simple to say, okay, sit down and play with your child. But most parents, when they sit down to play with their child, instinctively go into educator mode. They want to, direct the play, or they want to make sure that the child's doing something that's, meaningful or worthwhile or educational. And that is the mindset that you want to leave behind. Your only goal in special playtime is pleasurable interaction. That is your only goal. Now, you will likely have other things that will come from this special playtime, because what you're creating is a space for a child to be who they are as they are, and you are providing unconditional positive regard. So you are basically saying to them, you matter. You are important just because you exist, not because of what you do, not because of your grades, not because of your behavior, not because of anything other than your very existence on this planet. You are important. And that is a very powerful message to anyone. And it is a very powerful message to children as they grow up. And imagine growing up with that kind of feeling of, I really matter. I'm important. And isn't that really what we want for our children? For them to feel like they matter, that they have an impact, a sense of agency in the world. So the way to do that is to create time. I mean, the only way to build a relationship is time. And so if you can carve out and make it sacred time, so that your child knows that every Wednesday at 6:30, that's my half hour that I get with mom, or that's my half hour that I get with dad, that I get to be the boss. I get to make the decisions, and I get to be in charge of what we're going to play. And I'll be honest with you, depending on the age and stage the child may be in, it may be excruciatingly boring, because they may play the same thing over and over and over again for weeks. Repetition, it's how children learn. It's part of what they do. Your job is not to change it. It's not to judge it. Your job is simply to be present and available for whatever it is that the child wants to share with you in the way that they want to share it. And that's the way children express themselves best. It's through play. And so creating the space for them to communicate how they want to do it sends them a very powerful message that they have agency in the world, that they matter, and that what they think and feel and say is important, and that they have an audience for that, and that you think what they think is important. So it's challenging. It feels like it's a simple thing to say, sit down and play with your kid. But when you're sitting down to play with your kid and monitoring yourself, not to guide the play or change the play or try to teach them, it becomes a little bit harder. But I challenge you to try this, to really put it on your calendar, because it will absolutely impact your relationship in ways that you won't even believe it. It is probably the single most important kind of prescription that I give to all parents. Again, regardless, I've been giving that prescription for 25 plus years, and I still stand by it. It is absolutely, hands down, the most important thing that you can do for your child in your relationship. So that being said, I'll stop and see if anybody has any questions around that, and then we'll move on to some more kind of specific divorce kind of specific things that I think are really important for kids in that process. And if you don't have questions now, they may come up later, and that's fine too. So
I did receive a question, and I was wondering about how they'd asked if, with inconsistency between the rules with special playtime and regular playtime, how do you communicate to the child that now it's not special playtime anymore? This was the question.
Fabulous question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because that's what I left out. It's really important that special playtime have a name. It doesn't have to be special playtime. You can call, if your child's name is John, then John time, or it can be you and me time, or I'm the boss time, or I don't care what they name it, let the kid name it. Doesn't matter what it's called, but it's really important that it does have a name so that you can differentiate it from the other time. This is also a really good tool, because when your kid wants to boss you around outside of special playtime, you can say, oh, hold on, it's not special playtime. It's not John's the boss time. I'm the boss. And John's the boss time, you're the boss. So we're not in John's the boss time. So it's a really, really important question. So thank you, because I forgot about that. And yes, it needs to have a name, because that way you differentiate it and the child can differentiate it. And the other thing about special playtime is sometimes parents really get wigged out about this one, but if they want to play, say, board games, they want to play Candyland, but they want to cheat. Ooh, in special playtime, you're the boss. You can do it any way you want to. You want to have all the turns? Carry on. You are the boss. Special playtime, you get to make all the decisions. And it's that sense of power and ability to make those decisions. I mean, for kids, they don't get to make a lot of decisions. And this is a place where they truly get to be in charge. They get to make the decisions. And in play, gravity's not even real. Anything can happen in play. So this is a wonderful place for children to have an opportunity to try out being a decision maker. How do we expect kids to be good decision makers if we never give them an opportunity to practice decision making? So it's a wonderful tool to help them in so many ways. I just can't tell you how important this is and how hard it is to fit into a busy work week when you've got school and work and soccer and and now if we've got to travel between homes, and I mean, so I get it. I know how hard it is, but I also know how precious and valuable it will be to your life and to your child's life.
We had a quick comment from one of our participants as well. They said, great suggestion, Dr. Forrester, and it is so important that parents have their special time with their child.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think, you have time in the car going to and from places, and those can be wonderful moments. And you have moments before bedtime as children are kind of winding down. And again, those are great, wonderful things. But this is a dedicated space for you to create. It's truly an atmosphere of acceptance. And if you start this with really young children, then by the time you get into the teen years, where they're into the things that you want to be discussing, if they know that they can come to you in a non-judgmental space, then they're much more likely to come to you with those kind of things. So it truly, truly is really, really important. So I have a big soapbox on that one, and I could go on, I could talk for an hour just on that, but I won't. I will let that suffice. If other questions come up, then certainly I'm happy to answer those. But I want to talk about some more kind of specific strategies when children are, or when parents are in the process of divorce, and just some tools to help children because it is a confusing time for kids. And I think we often think of children as resilient, and they are resilient. I mean, given the option, I mean, you're resilient or what, right? So, however, we underestimate how challenging it is for kids when it feels like the world is kind of falling apart around them. And again, when children don't feel like they have any control, and again, depending on the level of your child's capacity to understand and their language capacities and their developmental levels, I mean, I think we have to take into consideration how a child is perceiving what's happening. And so I really love social stories. And if any of you have worked with, speech and language therapists, that's a very popular tool that they use. And a lot of times with social interactions, we'll use social stories with kids. But it is a wonderful tool to help children understand and kind of begin to sequence events. You don't need to be, you don't need to write a novel when you write a social story. It needs to be really succinct, just short. And it can be as simple as notebook paper with stick figures, or as elaborate as, a Pinterest, put together book on tiny photos or whatever. I mean, just depending on your level of creativity. But I think it's important for kids, especially when schedules begin to change and they're like, wait a second, and hold on, daddy's here and mommy's here, and wait, we're over here at grandma's, and who's picking me up today? So I think creating social stories just around the daily life, and sometimes around just the divorce itself. Sometimes something as simple as, mommy and daddy met when they were in college. They liked each other. They decided to get married. They had children. They didn't get along so well anymore. They decided they could be better people if they weren't married anymore. Mommy is always mommy. Daddy is always daddy. That never changes. Now, Johnny lives with mommy on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays and Thursdays, and with daddy every other Friday, whatever the schedule is. So just kind of a nice little timeline that kind of puts things in order. Again, depending on your child's age and developmental level, a lot of, especially young children, they don't tell time. It's kind of an abstract concept. It's that kids are event oriented. So that helps them kind of put things in order. So a social story, I think, is a very, very good tool. And you can really kind of make that specific to your child and your situation. And you can make it as, like I said, as simple or as elaborate. The other thing, when you make those books, I like to either laminate it or put it in those plastic kind of folders and leave it out so that the child always has access to it, so that they don't have to come if they don't want you to know that they're reading it, that it's just out in the living room, that they can always find it, that it's just there, it's available, or it's kept in their room, so that they can look at it and kind of, reread it and go over it again. And another thing I think is hugely important, and now there are lots and lots of children's books on divorce and separation and various family constellations and types. And it doesn't have to fit your situation specifically, but reading children's books as a launch pad for discussion is, I think, one of the best ways to help kids manage feelings around divorce, because for many children, it feels very isolating. It feels foreign to them. they, unless they've experienced it through a best friend or in some other way, divorce is like, what do you mean? What is this word? And why is my family, not together anymore? And so reading about divorce and separation in books, it normalizes it for kids. It helps it feel like it's not such a foreign thing, that they're not, some alien, who's living this weird situation. It's like, oh, okay, this is something that happens. For very young children, there's lots of books with animals, which works better for very young children because it depersonalizes it even one more step and makes it a little easier for them to digest. For older kids, they may be able to, some of them may. Another point is that some kids may regress. You may find lots of regressions in as your family is kind of falling apart. You might find that your child suddenly is no longer toileting the way that they could, or that they're wetting the bed, or they're, not wanting to go to school, or maybe their grades are dropping, or so you might find that your child is regressing. And I think putting language to all the things that are happening is one way to address that. And even to say out loud to them, maybe it feels hard. Maybe it feels hard to use the potty right now. Maybe it feels hard because things are different, and maybe you don't like that. So literally just saying it out loud. It's not that you're gonna fix it or shame them about it, but just to notice what is. But books create a launch pad for when you're finding it hard to find a discussion. Then you're reading a book about, dinosaurs divorce, or, at Daddy's on Saturdays, or was it the chocolate pudding? For young children, preschool children in particular, are very apt to believe that they in some way caused, that they still are in that magical thinking phase. And so, they think that, I left my toys out, that upset, mommy, and then she decided to move out. Oops. And so there's a wonderful little book called Was It the Chocolate Pudding, where two little boys get chocolate pudding on the wall, and they think because of that, their parents got divorced. So it addresses those kind of situations. So there's tons and tons of books. There's a variety of places you can, now you can go into Amazon and type in, children's books divorce. You can go to your public library and get books. I have a book list on my website that you can download that's broken down by topics, and divorce is one of those. So I think having children's books and reading those books, and you can just incorporate it into, your nightly reading ritual. If you read 3 books, then, slip in a divorce book every 2 or 3 nights, so that it provides, like I said, it's really a launch pad for discussion. Any questions on those things thus far?
There is a question from a participant. If the reaction from a child is aggression, how do you handle that to help the child understand?
So I'm assuming the reaction to the divorce in general is aggression. But I would take that to mean. So, well, I think, again, I would read books, because there are some, the book that kind of pops into my head is I Don't Want to Talk About It. And it's a kid who, every time the parents try to bring up divorce, she goes and covers up her head and, I don't want to talk about it. And I would put language to that. I would say, I think you are feeling upset. Maybe you are feeling angry. And I think your idea is that if you, depending on what kind of aggression is, if you're hitting a parent, if you're hitting a sibling, if just to note, you can be angry and you can be upset. And I absolutely understand that. And you may not hurt your brother, your sister, you may not hurt me, you may not hurt yourself. I'm happy to find you a way to help you feel better. And you may not hurt people. That is not going to work. that may come up again in something more specific, but in general, I would acknowledge the feeling, but I would be really clear that it's not allowed. That's not going to work. You really want to draw a line with that. Okay, I'm going to move on to a couple of more things. I think in Dr. Jagger's presentation, the previous presentation, I think she mentioned a wall calendar, and I think that is a wonderful tool. Ideally, if each parent can have a calendar in their home so that the child can have the consistency of knowing when they're going to be where. Again, if the child is very young and they don't really know days of the week and time, you can talk about it in sleeps. In 2 more sleeps, you go to daddy's, you'll stay there for 2 sleeps, and then you'll come home back to mommy's house. And then you'll go back home to daddy's house after 4 sleeps. So putting it on the calendar, and you can use pictures, you can use stick figures, you can use whatever, works for your child. But having a calendar to help them orient themselves when they're going to be where. Ideally, if their routine can remain as much the same as possible, if they had soccer on Thursdays, if that can still happen, that they can still have their routines, that as much of that can remain intact, that's nice for the kids. In terms of shifting from home to home, I often talk to parents about, imagine if you had to go to work, but every 3rd day you had to go to a different location, and you had to take everything with you. So you got to pack your computer and your, all the stuff that you're going to need, and take it, schlep it over to this office because, oops, 3 more days, then you got to go back to this office. So for the kids, it's like, I'm leaving my bed, I'm leaving my clothes, I'm leaving the things that are comfortable. So I think it's important, and divorce can bring out lots and lots of things. And I've had a lot of kids who, parents get really upset about, they don't want to send the clothes over there because the clothes won't come back. And I think those are things that need to be worked through. But the kids need to have the things that make them comfortable. And it may just that you have to have, 2 sets of clothes, 1 at each house. And maybe if parents can't figure out how to make sure things get back and forth, that you just have duplicates at each home. But I think it's really important for kids to have things around them that make them feel comfortable. So whether it's the kind of pajamas that they like, or the kind of sheets that they like, or if they have a lovey, if they have a special lovey object that can go back and forth. I've had parents who've even very amicably worked out to allow the pet to go back and forth between homes, so that the dog travels with the child, or the cat, or whatever. And so I think that's great when that can work out. So whatever is going to help the child to feel comfortable. And for very, very young children, that can be really disruptive in terms of suddenly they're in an apartment and with people they don't know, and around them. I mean, if you live in a neighborhood and the neighbors and go out in the yard and play, but then suddenly part of the time you're in this apartment and there are people around, you've never seen these people, you've never been in an apartment. So I think trying to see the world through a child's eyes. What does it feel like when you're a tiny little person and all the things around you that comfort you and make you feel safe, if you don't have access to that? Then how do you calm and soothe yourself? What kind of, things do you need? Is that a teddy bear? Is that having, and we live in the age of FaceTime and Zoom. So, I encourage parents to allow children to have contact with the other parent, even when they're at the other house. That can get sticky. Some people really can't manage that. But I think it's important that children know that they have access to their parents at all times, not that I can only access mommy on Monday through Thursday and I can only access daddy on Fridays. Well, that doesn't feel like co-parenting. And I feel like kids really need to know that their parents are there for them, even if they're not physically present. And I think one of the things that's really hard to do, divorce, what I say to parents is, look, divorce can really be a dark place. It can bring out the dark side of humans, right? So I think we have to keep in mind, for children, divorce is not about children. Divorce is about, that is an adult decision that children have no input in, nor do they have any way to change that. And I think you need to straight up say that to kids. You did not cause this. This did not happen because of you. This was an adult decision, and there is nothing that you can do to change it. You didn't cause it, and you cannot change it. This is a grown-up decision. You can be mad about it. You can be sad about it. You can have any feelings that you have, and you cannot change it. This is a grown-up decision. I think it's really important to say that, and to not try to fix their feelings, to not try to make them feel differently than they do. And if they're angry and upset, to acknowledge that, to make space for that, to make space for them to be sad, to wish for it to be different, and to acknowledge that. I understand you wish that it were not the case. You wish that mommy and daddy lived in the same house still. I know, I get it. So making space for that's really important. And the other thing I think is critical is that that parents do not make negative comments about each other. And I know Dr. Jaggers also mentioned that. It's really hard when people have been hurt to the core to not lash out. It feels like that's a really tough thing to ask of people. And yet it is really important, because for kids, they're left in a position of, well, if he's a sorry, blah, 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 and I'm half him, well, then I must be a sorry, blah, blah, blah. Or if she's a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad person, and I'm half her, then I must be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad person. The likelihood is strong, right? So it's really important to keep your adult feelings and your adult conversations in adult spaces. Kids do not need to be privy to the conflict. They don't need to observe it. They don't need to listen to it. It is not their burden to bear. And children do not vote. They do not make money, and they do not hire lawyers. Children need to be protected in this process. Judges do not have a developmental background. I've not had a single ad litem who had any developmental background. People don't understand how children develop. And because they don't pay taxes, nobody's looking out for them. This process, and I'm very, very strongly believe that, as hurt as you may be, you need to put on your big girl pants or your big boy pants and deal with that, because don't put it on your kid. It's really, really easy to say and really, really hard to do. When you're hurting as a person, go get help for yourself. Self-care is really critically important so that you can take care of your children, but don't put your stuff on them that doesn't belong to them. And so don't speak bad about them, don't speak bad about your ex. I mean, the reality is they gave you one, at least, I don't know how many kids you got, but you got at least one really awesome thing out of this. And so whatever else is under the bridge, don't put that on the kids. They don't need that. And it will only make it harder for them to get through this process. So when kids know that they are allowed to love both their parents, and you need to say that when they're at your house, you need to say, you can have any feelings you have about mommy. You can have any feelings you have about daddy. Mommy is still your mommy forever and always. Daddy is your daddy forever and always. That never changes. Parents do not divorce children. And you are allowed to love him and have good feelings about him. You're allowed to love her and have good feelings about her. That doesn't change. And so I think saying that out loud to kids is a relief to them, because most children, I would venture to say almost all children, are exquisitely attuned to their parents, and they know what you are feeling without you necessarily even saying it. But you need to say to them, it's okay for them to feel however they feel about the other parent. If they're angry, and if they ask you questions about what happened, and they ask you questions about the other parent, you need to direct them to the other parent. You know what? That's a great question. You need to ask mommy about that. That's a great question. You need to ask daddy about that. But to not give them your somewhat probably jaded at the moment. I mean, and let's be honest. I mean, in the process of divorce, people are hurt, and it's really hard. It's really hard to rise above. But in the interest of your children, it is absolutely worth it. There is a great book. It's called The Good Divorce, and it was written years ago, 1993, I believe, by Constance Ahrens, Ahrons, I believe it is. And it's a great little book about keeping the kids at the forefront of this divorce process. And so I would encourage you to look that up. I'm sure it's still available. So I'm going to pause and take a breath there and see if we have any other questions come in.
Dr. Forrester, I think it's so powerful that you emphasize that mommy is always mommy and daddy is always daddy. And while the child's relationship to the child changes, their parents remain constant. That's really powerful to hear. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to say that, because again, it's kind of like when children move for the first time, and parents forget, like, you've probably moved several times in life, but for the first time a child has ever moved, they have no concept of what that even means. What do you mean move? It's like, oh, so you have to explain it to them. We're going to leave this house. We're going to live in this house now. We're going to take these things. They're going to go into a big truck. They're going to be delivered. We're going to unpack them. Oh, that's what moving is. So divorce, it's like, well, what's divorce? I mean, maybe they've heard it on the playground. Maybe they've had experience with cousins or friends, or maybe they haven't. But what does that mean? What is divorce? Does that mean I'll never see my daddy again? Does that mean that my mommy doesn't love me anymore? I mean, you need to explain very clearly what divorce is. Mommy and daddy have decided that they are not going to live together anymore. But that does not apply to kids. Mommy's always mommy, daddy's always daddy. And that even holds when new people come in, if there are step parents, you know, mommy's still mommy, daddy's still daddy. Even when you have other people who are additive in your life, that doesn't change.
Hi, there is a question from a participant on how to handle when one of the parents speak negatively about the other parents. You have suggested that parents shouldn't, but in case it does happen, how do you handle it?
Well, so for the instance, a child comes home and says, you know, well, daddy said that you know, you're a mean person, that you're a terrible person. Then I would simply say something to the effect to acknowledge that, you know, the child's trying to get you to respond, right? So you could simply say, well, I'm sorry that maybe he feels that way. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to make it different. Just whoop, don't reciprocate. Shucks. You know, I would just kind of acknowledge the child, but then I wouldn't take the bait to go any further with it. Because then it becomes, you know, kids get roped into sometimes being the messengers. Well, you tell her or you tell him, and I wouldn't go there. So if the other parent is doing that, I would just acknowledge the child and say, that's a really hard thing. I'm sorry that he said that. You know, maybe he will feel different later. I don't know. I would just kind of acknowledge it and let it go.
Thank you, Dr. Forrester. We have one more question.
Okay.
Suppose a child has experienced abuse from one parent, should you still assure them of that person's love?
That's a little different scenario. And so that, and I hesitate to kind of go too deeply into that, because that's a very situational scenario, and depending on what kind of abuse and how and when the abuse occurred, and so I would say that's very situational, and without, you know, a lot of details, that'd be hard to kind of answer. And I'm not asking for details. I'm just saying, if a child has experienced abuse, it's tricky, because if the parent still has access to the child, then we get into all kinds of legal kind of caveats, and how do we keep the child safe. So I think what you can say to a child is that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you stay safe no matter where you are. That may be that you're working through an attorney or a judge or other medical professionals. But I think what you can say is, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you stay safe. Just a couple more things I wanted to add on here before we kind of wrap up for more questions, is using resources in the community. And I know Dr. Jaggers posted a lot of those on her talk last time. But other resources that you already have at your disposal are your child's teachers, your child's therapists, those folks who are a part of your child's consistent daily life, can be a fabulous support during this time. You don't need to, it's not like you're going to go and try to get the teacher to be, you know, on the side of one parent or the other. But what you are, I think you can do is let those folks know who are seeing your child in school every day, or if they're working with therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, psychologists, whatever, is helping those folks to know what's going on in your child's life, so that they can also support them and also normalize it. Again, for many children, this may feel like this foreign land, and nobody in the world has experienced this, and I'm some weird person who has this family situation. And so I think those people can really be supportive in helping children understand, this feels hard right now, and you are okay. You still have all of these places and all of these people in your life who support you and care about you and are here for you. And I think it's really important that children know that they have those supports that they can go to and utilize. So make sure that your teacher or your therapist knows, hey, this is where we are in this process. This is what's happening, so that they can support your child as well. And I just want to circle back around to self-care. It's really, really important that you take care of yourself. Divorce is one of those top stressors in life that can really undo people. And it's okay if you need to kind of step back and do some self-care. You may experience some regressions yourself. And so taking care of yourself is not a selfish thing. Taking care of yourself is allowing you the bandwidth that you're going to need to take care of your children. And you know, the old adage about you can't pour from an empty vessel. Well, it's true. And if you are completely empty and strung out and done to the very end of your capacity, you don't have anything to give to your child. So it's really critically important that you are taking care of yourself in this process and allowing yourself, you know, to grieve and to feel whatever feelings you have, your anger, frustration, sadness, grief, and seeking out supports for yourself. You know, if therapy is an option, then yes, go do that. If that's not an option, then there are, you know, some local resources where at least you get maybe some respite. If you have, you know, whether it's once a month that you can have a sitter, or, you know, a child's night out or in where you can have a little time just to go and be by yourself a little bit. It's really, really important that you do that for yourself so that you can be there for your kids. And also allowing kids the bandwidth for, you know, that as they regress, and to understand that just because they regress, it doesn't mean that they're never gonna get that skill back, you know, and development is zigzagged anyway. And so when you have a trauma, and divorce is a trauma for kids, I mean, there's no way around that. When you have trauma, you got to kind of go in there and deal with that so that you can kind of come out of that. And your kids are going to need some space and time to do that. And you need to give them assurance that that they will be okay. They can do hard things. This is a hard thing, and they're going to get through it. And you're going to be there with them all the way through it, no matter what. I think that's really, really an important message is we all need to know that we belong, and we all need to know that we got somebody on our team. I mean, so that's what you want to let the kids know. You belong. Our family is different now. It looks different. It feels different, and you still belong, and you're going to be okay. And you're going to have people to help you get there. It's going to be all right. And simply saying, you know, I love the phrase after a while. Right now, this feels hard. Right now, you're not able to. Right now, you know, you're sad. And after a while, I think it will feel different. After a while, you will be able to. After a while, it won't feel so hard. Because then you're undergirding them with hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. It's not always going to feel this way. And helping them understand, you know, feelings, emotions, they're like the weather, they change. You know, today you're mad. And then when they wake up tomorrow morning and they're giddy about, you know, whatever show they're watching, and you say, hey, you know, remember yesterday when you were really mad? And then right now you don't seem mad. Huh, look at that. So you point out to them how their emotions change, because they feel like if I'm in this space right now, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm always going to feel this way. And so you need to point out, no, right now you feel that way. And then an hour later, you point out, hey, are you still mad right now? Huh, look at that. You're not mad anymore. Huh, feelings change. So helping them to understand that just feeling whatever it is they feel is okay is not going to last forever. Okay, I'll pause again and see if there's any other questions about any of that.
I have a question from one of the participants. Can you speak to the feelings of shame and or embarrassment that parents may face when having to explain family situations to therapists, to school, etc.?
Well, I mean, I want to say It happens to lots of people. Don't be ashamed about it. And that's a really unhelpful answer. And it's kind of like when kids are in the grocery store in their Batman costume and, their, red boots that they've worn for the past 5 days, and, they've dropped the yogurt on the floor, and all you want to do is just get out because, the nice old lady's looking at you, giving you advice, and then the guy's coming down the aisle, and you just think, oh God, just get me out of here. And the people who are looking at you are probably just thinking, oh, thank God it's not me today. It feels hard because especially if it's a situation that you didn't ask for and it's not something that you saw coming, or because of your own feelings about it. And I would say, again, if therapy is an option, life is going to present all kinds of things for people. And it's, what they say is it's not what happens, but how you handle it, right? Well, that's, again, easier said than done, and not very helpful in the moment when you're in severe pain and you're looking at your life thinking, how will I go on? And you feel very vulnerable. And vulnerability is not something that we want to kind of flout and put out there. And yet it is only in vulnerability that we can find our strength. And so I think what I would say to that is being brave. I use this with my anxious kids a lot, is being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Being brave is being scared and doing it anyway. And so putting it out there and realizing that people will probably be a lot more understanding and empathic than you might think. And so being brave and saying it anyway, even when it feels shameful. But in most cases, shame may be what you feel, but divorce happens. It happens to about 50% or more of marriages. So, and there's lots of reasons for divorce. I mean, people grow apart, people are different, and they marry at one point in life, and then they're suddenly different people and different wants and desires. There's lots of reasons that people get divorced, and it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean that you failed. It means for whatever reason it didn't work. And a wise friend once told me that relationships don't have to last forever to be meaningful. Well, there you go. And I think if you can look back on relationships and take the good and the growth that you got from that, and some of that was through pain, maybe, but realizing that you have the power to harness that and to move on from it. And part of that is believing in yourself. Okay, I can do hard things. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. And I can be okay. And that says a lot to your kid when you take that kind of an attitude. When you say, you know what, I didn't, this is not exactly what I had planned. This is not the way I saw it. And I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to be okay. And you're going to be okay. And we're going to be okay. That was a long answer.
I wanted to say something in reference to letting the teachers know. Mm-hmm. Someone once shared how they would email the child's teacher to let them know where they had been at the weekend, because Mondays were very difficult at their dad's when they had been there all weekend. So that's something that we could use as well.
Yeah, I think giving information to teachers is important because, I mean, frankly, teachers are going to spend 7 hours a day 5 days a week. That's a lot of time with your kid, right? And so just giving them a heads up, that, hey, that, there was a change in custody, now he goes here, there, when, if you notice something different, if he comes without, X, Y, or Z, it's because that's at this house instead of at that house. So just giving them a heads up, I think, is really great. And then they can really, I think it also helps them to really be more present and available for the child, because they know kind of what's going on. And I think it's also helpful for them to know who's picking up for kids. Again, having that schedule, and maybe you send that schedule to school so that the teacher knows daddy's dropping off on Monday, mommy's picking up Monday afternoon, daddy picks up Thursday, mommy will be back on Monday, so that they know, and they can, particularly for young children, who's picking me up? Where am I going today? So that's a great point.
Thank you, Dr. Forrester. We are about to wrap up. We have 5 minutes, and I think we have time for one more question. There is a question somebody has asked: what are some strategies to help extended family members support neurodiverse children in a divorce situation without being too intrusive?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think any of these tools, extended family, whether that's aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins, can also help by reading books, having discussions. I think it's also important that you say to extended family members, please don't speak poorly about his mom, her dad. Please don't, I know, parents are going to be on the side of their child, right? And so they're going to be very prone to want to demonize that person who's hurt their child, particularly with grandparents. So be really clear about them, how, as much as we can talk about this, please don't talk about it with the kids, because that's too hard of a burden for them to have to bear. But I think you can also, if you have access to family members, extended family members, utilize those resources. Those are people who are familiar to your child, who know your child, who have relationships with them. And absolutely, if they can become more present in the child's life, and that also can be a really big help to you as a parent in self-care, is having someone that you trust to leave your child with so that you can go and do some self-care. But absolutely having them read books, because again, the more you normalize this, the more the child doesn't feel so ostracized, or like, whoa, what is this weird situation that's happening to me and nobody else in the world? So reading books, and having, I think if grandma or grandpa or aunts or uncles or older cousins can do special playtime with kids, hey, if a kid could have special playtime with somebody every day, wow, that would be awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If there's no other questions to wrap up, but thank you so much, Dr. Forrester, for all the wonderful information. And thank you all for your time and participating, and for all your wonderful questions as well. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, please click on the link to the survey, which is in the chat. It's just 5 questions. It'll just take just under a minute. If you could do that, we'd certainly appreciate that. And we hope that you can join us for our next seminar, our 3rd and last webinar in the series, how to support your neurodiverse kids in divorce. And that'll be on Wednesday, March 23rd at 7 p.m. So if you signed up for this one, then you'll get a reminder notice with the link to the next session. And if you know others who would be interested in participating, then please let them know as well. And in case you missed the first session and want to see this one again, or want to catch a third one if you're not able to make it, then they'll all be linked on a YouTube site which we set up called Supporting Neurodiverse Kids in Divorce Project, or you can just do a search in YouTube for LoneStar Len Divorce and it'll come up. The first one from Dr. Jaggers is up there already, and this one with Dr. Forrester will be up hopefully in a few days as well. So Thank you so much for your time. Any other questions before we let everybody go? Not then. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you.